Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the virtual art gallery workshop. I'm your host and instructor for this episode here in our segment, Christopher Epling. Thanks so much for participating, and I hope everyone is enjoying this process. Hope everyone is finding it, both fun and educational at the same time. That's the big point of all this, is to really establish something that the students can participate in. Meeting the standards of language arts as well, and then also at the end of this is to have a product, something you've created, and that's something you're proud of too. As long as you follow each tutorial and each step and each session, and you cover those sessions and you listen to the guidelines and the parameters set forth, then you should be successful in your efforts of creating a story that may be considered to be published. So good luck to everybody. I hope the process is going. We're halfway over, which is pretty exciting. So I want to review just quickly before we get into today's topics and focus on what you should have already finished up to this point. Now, if you're not all the way up to where we should be, that's okay. Don't get overwhelmed. But I do want to stress to you though that we are halfway over. So please try to get all of the past sessions and requirements taken care of so that you're up to speed and you're caught up with the rest of the students. So what we should have already, you should have in the beginning chosen either a leader or a legend. That's the focus of our virtual art gallery workshop for this session. So that was your two options, leader or legend. After you chose which direction you're going to go down, your next step then was to research and to get information, gather information on your topic. So for instance, if you were doing a leader, or you chose a leader option, then you would probably want to look into the background of the person or individual. You want to find out what makes them significant, what did they do to contribute to their community or your community, and then construct your story. Now, this sounds overwhelming, the leader portion. I understand. It's some research involved. But the thing is, if you're doing, let's say, a picture book, you want to keep it sort of simple. So each page has a minimum amount of words on it, so it could start out just giving the background of the person, lead into what they did that was significant, and then close it out by saying, how they helped the community. Now, legends are a little different. For legends, you should have chosen either something that was a myth or a superstition or a legend in your region or community. Legends are really vast. They could be something that someone is really well known about, such as a haunted house down on the corner on Main Street, or something to doing with past generations superstitions, such as on New Year's or Christmas Eve each year. Some of our elders believe that animals could talk, so that's a superstition. That would be a really interesting book. So for each one of these topics, you should have chosen what direction you're going down. Then you should narrow that down to either a specific person that's made a difference or a particular legend or superstition in your community. After you have that, you've performed your research, you've gathered your information, and you've written a story. Now, last week we started talking about penciling your page a little bit. We looked a little bit at storyboarding and what that is and how to construct a storyboard. So let's say that you haven't watched some of these other sessions. It's really important to go back and take a look at that. Your storyboard, which we'll be covering in more depth today and looking on how that actually works with your book, is one of the most important pieces to the puzzle of becoming successful at this. Storyboards help help to guide the author, or in a publishing setting, it would be a whole team of people. But it helps to guide you to create your book. It's like the blueprints to your book. So you should have your story, and then you break that down into storyboards. Then you have your storyboards beside you, and you start to pencil in your pages based on what your storyboard guides you with. Another really, really good hint, or not really a hint, but a step that some students miss, it's like a missing piece of the puzzle here a little bit, is before they start penciling their pages, they never really know what the characters look like. So this is a huge disadvantage. You need to pencil out your characters. So let's say you have a certain leader that you're going to be drawing a whole lot in your book. We'll try to draw that leader a few times, sketch them out in different angles and different what we call perspectives. Draw that person out. You want to know how you're going to draw the characters in your story before you ever start penciling your page. And we're going to cover that a little bit more today. But your storyboard helps to guide you. It helps to move you along. Now, I was wondering on what would be the best way to structure today's session. And I think probably the best way to go is to give you just examples from my own work. I'm an illustrator. I work professionally as an illustrator. And I want to walk you through the steps of this, which matches the steps you're taking to create your book. They're no different at all. It's the exact same set of steps that happen. So let's take a little bit of a glance at what it is like to be an illustrator. And we'll tie this into the Virtual Art Gallery Workshop and your requirements as an illustrator for your work, okay? All right, so first thing is, no matter what you're doing or what type of project you're working on, you start out with this. This is a story. Now this particular story is called The Pirate Ship Bed Trip. It's written by Nancy Jane Quackenbush. She's out of St. Augustine, Florida, okay? I am actually her illustrator for this new title. Her publisher is Hidden Wolf Books. They're a regional publisher there in Florida. So her name is Jane Quackenbush. It's an interesting last name for sure. But this is the manuscript of her story. So this is what you should have finished. Now, if you typed it out, that's great. If you've handwritten it, that's okay too. So don't get too overwhelmed with how this is structured so much. But this is what you should have. You should have a completed story. So as an illustrator, we receive this completed story first, a manuscript. It's paper. There's no pictures on it. There's no guidelines. It's just words on a page. It's our job then to take those words and turn those into illustrations. How that process works matches exactly what your process is for creating your book. So let's take a look a little bit closer here and see how this works. So we have the manuscript. The illustrator will read this manuscript totally over, entirely, thoroughly, maybe multiple times, okay? The next step in this is you actually go through the manuscript and you start to decide where will the illustrations take place. And if you notice here, I've got numbers and a parentheses beside each one of these books here, paragraphs. So for instance, I will read the first small paragraph here, and I'll say this will be one illustration. Number one, my first illustration. These are the words that's going to appear on my first page. Then I'll read a little further and I might say these words will all appear on my second illustration. So all of these words that you're seeing here will fall on the second illustration, the page for that. Then we have the third illustration, so on and so forth. So you break down your manuscript and you decide, using your story, where your illustrations will take place. This is a huge portion of building your storyboard, because what happens is, after we've decided where the illustrations will take place, we then will go and start work on our storyboard, okay? Now, a storyboard is just basic drawings. We showed you this last week. You keep your manuscript beside you, like this, and you start to build your storyboard. So I might say, okay, for this first illustration, I'm going to put a box for my page. We've decided, is it landscape, is it portrait? We covered that. If you don't know what that is, be sure and watch the last session. So here's my first page, so I'll put page 1, okay, and then I'll put another box here for page 2, okay, page 2. Now, you may have your book orientated like this, which is landscape. That's perfectly fine. This is stuff that you have to decide at the creation of your storyboard. So these are two examples here. All right, so this is, let's say this is one picture book and this is another picture book. This is page 1 and this is page 2. Okay, so after we have our boxes drawn, we take our manuscript and we'll say, okay, I know here is one illustration, so this little small paragraph is going to appear on page 1. Then you read over what you've written and you sketch out, even in little tiny thumbnails or stick figures, what's going to be taking place on the page once you finish it. And then you also decide where the words will appear. What I like to do is draw a little box. Now that box will not appear in my finished illustration, but I know where the words are going to appear on the page before I ever start. So then I move on to, look, my second illustration. I've already branched off my story, I've marked it out, I know exactly what's going to appear. So here's number 2, and this is the paragraph that's going to appear on number 2. Here's page number 2 over here. So I read what's going to take place on my second page. Okay, first I may branch off here and say this is where the words are going to appear, right over here in the corner, in the right-hand corner. And then I might draw a sketch of what's taking place. So there might be a building this time. There might be a building here, the door, a street, a person crossing a street maybe, okay? So building your storyboard really relies on you going through your story page by page after you've decided what pages or what's going to appear on each page, and then sketching out these thumbnails of what's going to appear. Now, let's say you've finished your manuscript is already finished by now. You've decided how many illustrations you're going to need. You've decided what words are going to appear on what page, and now you've moved slowly into designing your story and putting your story together. This is where you want to prepare your pages by knowing what your characters are going to look like. So character design is a huge portion of this. So this all ties into penciling your page. Your completed pages rely heavily on your preparation for the finished page. So your storyboard in connection with your sketches for your characters, in connection to your manuscript or your story itself. All these things come together to produce a finished page. So let's take a look a little bit about character design, okay? So for In Jane Quackenbush's The Pirate Ship Bed Trip, we have certain characters, and I've sketched some of those out. Before I ever start working on my finished page, I know what the characters are going to look like. Now don't get too overwhelmed by how detailed this is. That's not the point of this. I want you to, just remain calm. Don't get overwhelmed. So here's one of the characters for In Jane Quackenbush's The Pirate Ship Bed Trip. So this is the design for the character. I've drawn her in what we call profile, which is to the side. This is to the front. Okay. Here's another character for the Pirate Ship Bed Trip. This is James. So you see how I've sketched out each character before they ever start. This is a little bunny that is in the story here who always hangs around James. Every character is sketched out. This is the main captain of the ship here. So you can see he has a hook hand. He's got a sword here in his belt, and see I've drawn his shoes out. I know exactly what the characters are going to look like. Now some illustrators will go as far as to add color, and I actually had to do that for a couple of these. She wanted to know, the author wanted to see what the characters would look like in color. So I sketched out, and this is watercolor and pen and ink, some of the characters interacting with one another to show her what the colors will look like in the story. So for your story, it's a good idea. If you want to go this far with it to add color, that's perfectly fine. It's up to you. Color, get as detailed as you want to get with this. It's your prerogative, as they say, or your decision. But the more preparation that you have before you ever start penciling your page, the more chances are that each page is going to turn out as best as it can be. So it's all about preparation right now. You have your manuscript. How do you turn that into pages? Now, we've covered a little bit on picture books mostly this morning, so let me just do a quick overview as well on graphic novels and chapter books. So let's look at this a little bit more detail here. So let's say you've decided to put together a graphic novel, and it would work similar to what we have here for the picture book. So you've written your story. The story is written out here. It's finished. So now you'll go through and you decide, again, we'll cover chapter book first, what's going to appear. So chapter books work a little differently, right? There's more words, less illustrations. So for a chapter book, we might say this entire page makes up one chapter, okay? So we know this entire page here is one chapter. Now usually you have this already decided upon, and you don't have to go through. So you have chapter 1, chapter 2, and then the words follow. So we know that all of these words are going to appear on one chapter. So when I do the storyboard for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, just like I would for the picture book, these boxes that represent pages, okay? And I might say all of these words are going to appear on, let's say, 5 pages. So I'm going to draw 5 boxes really fast here. 5 boxes. So this is page 1 through 5 of my story, okay? Now I need to add illustrations. So I might say here at the top of chapter 1, I'm going to have this illustration drawn. And let's say it's a house near the mountains, okay? There's the house, here's a little road coming down, the house is on a hill, okay? And I know by sketching this out that this is going to appear prior to chapter 1. So this is like an illustration that appears before a chapter heading. So at the bottom you could say chapter 1 here, and then start with your words. Or, if you wanted, you could have a full illustration. So this entire page here could be an illustration. All right, so we have somebody walking up a road that leads to a little house here on the hill, and then on the following page could be the start of your story. Another way you could line this out is you could say that you have your words here on the page, they're continuing down, and then you have an illustration that breaks the words up here. So in the middle of your words appearing on a page is an illustration. Think of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Diary of a Wimpy Kid has a lot of illustrations or drawings that take place sometimes in the middle of a page, on the side of a page. These are the types of things that you'll just have to decide what you want to do with your book. There's no real set guidelines for that, but you know, it's up to you. Now for graphic novels work a lot different, okay? Graphic novels, you've written a story, you have this manuscript or your story already in place, and now you're going to start putting these words to a page. Now, like I said before, graphic novels are the layout for them are quite different. You have to draw larger boxes for each page because what you have to decide upon is how you're going to place what we call panels. And panels, really all they are the boxes that the story takes place in. So in a comic book, everything takes place inside these boxes. And I've brought this to show you kind of an example. These boxes can be positioned in different ways on a page. They can be smaller, they can be larger, you could cut them in half, you could divide them any way you want. So when you're preparing a page for a graphic novel, you're deciding what's going to appear in the panels on your page. So you read your story and you may say, okay, this little section here will be panel 1, page 1, okay? So I know based on this little note that I've created beside of my words that this portion of my story is going to appear on panel 1, page 1 of my story. So that would be this panel. This is page 1 of my graphic novel, page 1. This is panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, so on and so forth. So this portion of the story appears here on the first panel of my storyboard. See how this works? So deciding on how many panels you need, it really is determined by your story. And what I like to do is I will read through my story and I'll make these notes. So this small little section will be panel 2, page 1. This portion right here will be panel 3, page 1. And excuse my handwriting. I like to draw, but I'm terrible with my handwriting sometimes. But anyway, so panel 1, page 1, panel 2, page 1, panel 3, page 1. And I'll write numbers in here to show you. So this is number 1, number 2, number 3. So I know exactly what's going to appear in each panel of my page by breaking down my manuscript or my story in this manner. Let's go back to character design for a second while we have the overhead camera here, and I want to show you a couple more of these examples. When you're sketching out for your character design, it's important to have each character of the story sketched out in full so you know what they're going to look like once you're starting your illustrations. This is what I've done for Nancy's book. So every character, here's a pirate, is sketched out. So this is a supporting character in the book. This is not a main character. So even though it's a supporting character, he only appears once in the story on one page. I've sketched him out. So I read through my story and I see how many characters are going to appear on each page, and I sketch those out as these little character references, okay? So I know what the characters are going to look like before I ever start penciling my page. All right, so that's that example. And now we're back to the front with the lady here. So I have my character designs ready. Let's say I have my storyboard ready. So let's talk a little bit about the process of putting this all together, okay? So again, your storyboard helps to guide you. And what I have here in front of me is the actual storyboard for Nancy's book. Now this might be a little hard to see. I'll hold it up a little closer. Now, as you can see, here's a small box that represents one of the pages. Here's another small box that represents one of the pages. I've made a copy of this, is why it's so hard to see, but you can tell by this that each page is sketched out. And let's turn it here, you can see another page. So here's two more pages of the story. And to see how I've made notes to myself, so if I may change something about the storyboard. For instance, this little note, you can't read it, but what it says is, back to the shoreline. So we're going to show the sun coming up over the ocean. And now in this particular sketch, and it's hard for you to tell, but I have the main characters back to the island. So the editor, or the publisher, I mean, asked me to change this so that his back is to the shoreline. So I've made this note to myself to remind me of that. But this is the actual storyboard for Nancy's book. And I wanted to show you, based on this, how to put together a finished page. So what I do is I know exactly what's going to appear on each page before, and I've marked this one out, I finished it, before I ever start. So I lay my storyboard beside me, okay? I get my paper out that I'm going to use to draw with, and I'm going to start to pencil my page, all right? So here's my paper, here's my storyboard, and my manuscript. Keep everything together. Now I've already decided what's going to appear on this page before I ever start drawing. I know what the characters are going to look like before I ever start drawing, and so that I have everything that I need before I ever start. So then I start sketching it out. Now here's a sketch for a finished page for Nancy's book. Now this is a lot of detail. Don't get overwhelmed by this. I stress this to you. Please do not get overwhelmed. So I've marked this out, but you could tell that this is a really just a quick sketch here of this finished page, and I may try to erase it a little bit so you can see through my scribbles here. And I'll mark this out each time I finish a page. I'll mark it out of my storyboard so I know where I'm at, and that can help a little bit to tell what we're doing here. So if you notice by the storyboard, we have a figure, and that's the bunny just sketched out, sitting on the shoreline, looking out into the horizon of the ocean, and there's a ship there. Okay, he's sitting on a rock, and this is the shoreline right here. Okay, that's what my storyboard tells me. And I have my manuscript handy, so I can go straight to that page, and I know what words are going to appear on this page. So let's just say this is page 3. There's the words that's going to appear on this page. So here's the sketch for page 3, okay? And then I pencil page 3. And this is a copy of the finished page. So I go in and I draw my page out, all my elements of my storyboard, okay? I sketch those out into the finished page here, and you can tell there's a lot more detail. From there, then, what I'll do is I start to add color. Now, that's something we'll go over in the next session. But once it's finished, it looks like this. Now, this is the finished watercolor page for that particular page we're looking at. So you see the 3 or 4 steps that's involved in this. And I'll lay it all out for you so you can tell. Now, this is what you should be doing for your book, okay? You mark on the page, on your manuscript, step 1, where the illustrations are going to appear. Step 2 is to sketch out thumbnails or a storyboard for each page that you've listed here on your manuscript. Step 3 is to draw out those characters so you know what they're going to look like before you ever start creating a finished page. Step 4 is to take your paper, have your storyboard handy next to you, and start to sketch out the page. And then step 5 is going to be adding color, which is something we're going to be covering next week for the next session. So this is all something that I really want you to pay close attention to because this is so important. Now I want to show you something really cool. Some of the art classes that you have are going to have this, or art rooms I mean. This little guy, this little wooden figure, is actually a very important element in drawing. This little wooden figure helps to show you what your figure or characters would look like in different positions in your story. Okay? If you have access to one of these, this will help you a whole lot, because actually this little figure here follows what we call the circle method or the Marvel method in putting your characters together, in drawing your characters. So it being a huge a part of penciling your pages is drawing those characters out before you ever start. And again, don't get overwhelmed by what I've shown you here with my work. Keep your work simple. It's not about your ability to draw like artists at Marvel or DC Comics. It's just about your ability to tell a story using words and pictures together in a way that works well, okay? And that's and what we mean by a way that works well, watch every session leading up to now and in the future sessions, listen to the guidelines, and you'll be perfectly fine, okay? So this little figure here, you can position it in different ways, and what it helps you to do is to tell what a person would look like if they were in a particular position. So here's one of the positions. I mean, you could put it in whatever position you want, and then you could turn it around to get different angles. So you see how you could tell a little bit by this what the perspective, as we call it, would be for this particular character if we were drawing in their story. Now I use these a lot actually, and I'll show you how I use it in action right now. Okay, so I'm going to position this in a way, the way that I want, and let's say he's cutting grass or she's cutting grass. Okay, so she's pushing a lawnmower. So I put the little wooden figure in front of me. If you don't have one of these, it's perfectly fine. But I do want you to pay attention to this method that I'm getting ready to show you, which we call the Marvel method or the circle method in drawing. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and jump to the overhead camera and we'll get ready to do a little sketching. So I have my figure placed here. I know this tells me what a person would look like if they were, let's say, pushing a lawnmower. And you could tell that's kind of what it is. You can imagine the two beams from the lawnmower coming down, and the lawnmower in front of this little character here, okay? And I position it in front of me, so I'm looking at it as I draw. And this is a good thing. From this camera angle here, you can see if we were drawing this character from looking straight down, okay, so our angle is looking down, you could see how this would help you to draw that character. That's a great observation there. So if you don't have one of these, again, it's okay. So we start sketching then. Now I use the circle method. So just like this little wooden character is made up of ovals and circles, that's exactly what I use when I'm drawing. So I'm sketching out my character. Now the reason I'm showing you this is I'm drawing out a character for my book. This would be the character design phase here, okay? So I'm using, just like this little wooden character has ovals for his upper arms, he has circles for his elbows, he has ovals for his forearms, little circles for his wrists, okay, circles for the hand. So you can see how I'm starting to sketch this out in a way that resembles a little bit the little wooden character I showed you. All right, we have an oval for the waist. Here's another oval for the hips there. All right, so now we're going to draw the legs. The legs are more ovals. So when you're sketching out your characters for your book, try to use this method. It will help you, especially when you're drawing humans. A lot of students have trouble drawing human figures, and one of the biggest reasons is they don't use this method. So here I have tons of circles and different shapes that will help me to draw my character. So then I go back over and I start adding the detail in there. So I may have some hair here, an ear, the face comes down like this. We'll put two eyes, a nose, there's his mouth, okay? There's the neck here, shoulders come down this way, connecting to the arms. So see, I'm just drawing an outline over top of those circles that I've placed to use to help guide me, okay? And this will be your character design phase here that I'm talking about. But you could also apply this to your finished drawing, right? So there's the hand holding the bars of the lawnmower. Here's another arm coming down. So I'm just tracing over what I've drawn in circles first. Now some students don't like this method at all. I've worked with students who say, you know, I cannot do the circle method in putting my characters together. Let's say you can't do that. That's perfectly fine. But what I wanted to do is just show you another option that you have in drawing. So see how I'm just tracing over my circles to finish off the legs here. Now I have his feet. Now a lot of students have trouble with shoes and hands, and I know why, believe me. They can be overwhelming, and we'll show you through the tutorials here. If you'll watch the tutorial that's going to be created today, you'll be able to get a better idea on how to draw hands and such. So see how I've used this little figurine to help guide me in drawing this person, okay? Now the circle method can be used to create almost anything. So let's say you're doing a legend or maybe even the leader section, and let's say you have a pig. So for a pig, you know, I draw a circle here, a larger circle behind. Now remember, keep it simple, all right? So here's the nose of the pig, and his legs, back legs, and his little curly tail. So you can see how this already looks almost like a pig, and all it is ovals and circles, and that's it. So we got eyes here, here's his nose. Now you press down harder whenever you're putting in the detail. You should sketch very lightly when you're drawing the circles. So you can see how this kind of works, okay? Now again, watch the tutorials. They're going to be available for you to tell how to use this method even more, okay? But before we stop today, I want to talk a little bit more about penciling your finished page of your book. And by doing that, I'll show you another example here. This is, like I said, the book we're using is Nancy Jane Quackenbush's Pirate Ship Bed Trip. Now this is a finished page for her book. Do not get overwhelmed by this. Again, you do not have to draw like you know, like I do, or paint like I do for this. This is just an example. So this page started out though as a thumbnail sketch. So I'm going to do this in reverse a little bit to show you what I mean. So there's the finished page. Down here below, I'm going to sketch what the thumbnail looked like for this finished page. So there's our finished page. So this would be your storyboard. Now graphic novels, those of you selecting graphic novels, do not feel overwhelmed by this. You do not have to have this much detail. You can use basic drawing techniques to put your book together. I'm not expecting you to have something as polished as what this is or something. So for the storyboard for this page, this particular page, I started out with drawing the ship over here to the left. Okay, so we have the ship sitting in water. Okay, there it is, and then I'll put the masts up here. So there's those. All right, then the water in the background with the trees of the island, the rocks of the island coming down. So I just sketched this out very lightly, really quickly, not a whole lot of detail to it. There's a boat setting right here in the water. The shoreline comes down this way. The beach comes up like this. Some rock and some more foliage. So this is the storyboard page, and I know where the words are going to appear. So the words will be down here in the water, right there. Not in a box, but so this is the storyboard page, or what it would look like for this finished page. Now this is the same thing that I hope that you're doing with your work, and the same thing that I hope you're following with the guidelines. So the goal is, though, is to take all of these elements that we have and eventually have a finished book. So this is Nancy's first book called The Rocket Ship Bed Trip. And so you can see the illustrations in this one here. So our first step, though, before we ever begin, is to take our manuscript, break it into pieces, put it into a storyboard, sketch out our characters, then work on the finished page. So the end result, hopefully, will turn out something like this, okay, for our finished book. And I hope that we have a whole lot of published authors and illustrators coming from this workshop. I believe in you. I know you can do this. I've seen so much just amazing work that came from the first workshop, so I'm really excited about what's going to happen. Now, watch the tutorials. If you're, let's say you've watched this today and you said, "Oh wow, this is way too much. I can't draw. I don't feel confident in my abilities to draw or put color on a page." Watch the tutorials that's going to be created for this session. Okay, those tutorials go into drawing, how to sketch your characters, how to draw, how to put next time color on the page. But also go to your library. You'll find books like this. This is one example. Here's another one. YouTube is a great resource on figuring out basic drawing techniques. So I realize some of you participating have never had an art class maybe. Who knows? Don't get overwhelmed by that. If you like to draw it how you feel comfortable and in your style. Think of Diary of a Wimpy Kid compared to, let's say, Spider-Man comics or Pixar movies. That's a huge range in between on where you could fall. So you have Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which is pretty much basic black and white stick figure type drawings, all the way up to Frozen or Disney's or Pixar movies. So that's a big range in between on where you could fall. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed by this. I want you to have fun. So I hope that you've enjoyed this session. I hope it's been informative. So for penciling your page, remember you have to have those requirements in line before you ever start putting pencil to paper. Okay, it's very important. So that's where we are for penciling your pages. This is part 2, week 5. So next time we meet, we're going to actually start talking about putting the words to your page, which is important. Where do you place the words and how those interact with your drawing? Now I realize we're talking about the storyboard, and we already know where our words will appear on the page, but putting words to a page is more than just figuring out where they're going to go. Okay, there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than that. And then the week following will actually be color. But what I might do next week is start branching into the color a little bit as we talk about the words on a page. Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this session. Good luck to everybody. Don't get overwhelmed by this. Just follow the guidelines step by step, and you're going to be fine. Okay. I expect to see a lot of just amazing work come out of this. Good luck. We're going to pick more students to be published. It's amazing. Stars Publishing is going to really enhance your opportunities for career development even. We're going to be working with students that have been published. We're going to be working with UPike and Moorhead even to create a business model. You're going to have your own website, so your books will be available online. Also, you'll have copies of your books to sell. We're going to put together local book signings at your libraries and places like that. So you'll be sitting at a table. You'll have a stack of books on each side of you. People will be coming up, shaking your hand, and buying your books and asking you to sign it. So a lot of good things to come. So take this seriously. This is a great opportunity for everyone. We want to thank, again, the Holler for producing the sessions and the tutorials. We can't do this without them. Also, very important, if you haven't been on the holler.org yet, you're missing out entirely. You're really missing out because all the sessions are on there. Resources are made available for the early resource for building your story and writing your story. So please go on the holler.org, see what other teachers are posting. If there's some resource you think it would help us, post it on there, share it. If you have your artwork you'd like to share, please share whatever you want. This is where we interact, theholler.org, okay? Thank you so much for participating. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.